Here are the top 100 VR games for PC VR. Let me know in the comments if you think I've missed a game that should be in this list. Let's start with first-person shooters. An obvious one, Half-Life Alyx. Not sure I need to say any more on that, it's awesome. Saints and Sinners 1 and 2 are both really good zombie games. They've also got human NPCs that you can ally with or just unalive. It's a great game with a really good melee physics combat system. I recommend just grabbing the first game, and if you want to play more when you're finished, then get the second. If you've had enough after the first game, don't bother with the second, because it's more of the same with only a couple of new locations and a few new weapons. I'm putting Boneworks on this list and not Bonelab, because I thought the Bonelab campaign was kind of pooey, and the Boneworks one is good. Although there is actually a mod for Bonelab that lets you play the Boneworks campaign in Bonelab, but it's still a work in progress right now. Medal of Honor Above and Beyond might not be the best game ever made, but it's still a full-length AAA VR game with good graphics and decent gameplay. Hot Dogs, Horseshoes and Hand Grenades has got loads of hot dogs, some horseshoes and a few hand grenades in it, and also hundreds of realistic guns fully modelled in incredible detail. There are also loads of different game modes included, with Take and Hold being my favourite. Vertigo Remastered is an excellent but short adventure shooter with about 4 hours to complete. It's got some really cool boss fights and loads of variety. Vertigo 2 is even more excellent. It'll take about 12 to 15 hours to complete. It's got some hard as balls boss fights and even more variety. I recommend playing them both. Superhot VR is a game about a really hot female and she's in virtual reality. Hubris means excessive pride. It's also a VR game with really nice graphics set in a sci-fi planet with some dodgy voice acting and average gameplay. But look at it, it's very pretty. District Steel released earlier this year, and it's still in early access, but it's got a 4-hour campaign you can play through, with more coming. It's got some nice graphics, especially when in the headset, but more importantly, it's got an incredibly satisfying gameplay loop, where you can boost into the air with a rocket arm, and then destroy robots whilst in slow motion. The Light Brigade is a roguelike shooter, with a dark, gritty aesthetic. It's got some really solid gunplay, and lots of replayability. Compound is a retro roguelite, with loads of made-for-VR weapons, enemies, and incredibly satisfying gameplay. It's a retro VR gamer's dream. Talking of dreams, have you ever woke up in the morning and the sheets are wet? Fallout 4 VR is Fallout 4 but in VR. The VR support is basic, but you can spend multiple days of your life downloading mods to make it better. Paradox of Hope is like the non-VR Metro games, but in VR and made by one person. But that one person is incredibly talented, and it's actually way better than you would expect. It currently has 2 single-player missions, but the main part of the game are the raids, where you go on runs to get loot through procedural levels. Arctica 1 is an Oculus PC exclusive made by the actual developers of the Metro games, so it's got AAA levels of graphics and polish. It is a little dated because it was made before they realised people can handle smooth locomotion, so you teleport to preset spots in a level, and you have to physically duck and peek around corners whilst in intense gunfights. Robo Recall is another Oculus exclusive. This one was the launch game for the touch controllers and was made by Epic Game Studios. This is back when Oculus were cool and weren't obsessed with the metaverse to the point they actually changed the entire company to Meta. Anyway, the game is good, but it is teleport only. You can rip robots apart, shoot them into the air, and catch bullets and then throw them back. Phantom Covert Ops is another Oculus exclusive with some really nice graphics and a Metal Gear Solid vibe. It's even got the voice actor of the original Solid Snake in it. You're in a tactical kayak with tactical tools like guns, and you can try to be stealthy or shoot everyone. If you don't want to play on your own, then there are a bunch of multiplayer VR shooters. Population 1 is a battle royale shooter with lots of screaming kids. Luckily you can mute them while spraying bullets at them from the air. Pavlov is a more traditional multiplayer shooter, which is also full of screaming kids. It's got a good variety of game modes, including Search and Destroy, which makes the game like Counter-Strike. Onward is a tactical shooter with slower paced gameplay, and guess what? This is also full of screaming kids, but you get to silence them tactically with your teammates. Contractors is my personal favourite with excellent gunplay, a nice balance between Pavlov and Onward, and it's got loads of incredible mods, with some that will pretty much convert the game into Team Fortress 2, Halo, or Battlefront 2. Breaches is as close as you're going to get to Rainbow Six Siege in VR, where you're either attacking or defending. You're breaching buildings, including rappelling down walls and bursting through windows. Ghosts of Tabor is like Tarkov, but in VR. You go on runs with both AI and real players in the map. You're trying to loot and survive. You need to get to the extraction point to keep all your gear, or you die and lose it all. We've also got a couple of adventure VR games. Lone Echo 1 and 2 are both Oculus exclusives, and they both have AAA quality with great visuals. You're in zero gravity and you have to grab the world and push yourself around to move whilst avoiding a lethal biomass. Robinson the Journey is like a walking simulator with some light puzzle elements. This is made by Crytek, so it looks incredible, although you do need to tweak a few things, which I'll put in the description. The best part, it's got photorealistic dinosaurs in it. Some co-op games include Zero Caliber. This has a campaign with missions you play through, which you can play by yourself or with up to 3 other people. It's fun, if a little bit clunky, and it also has PvP now. Windlands 2 is a game where you swing around firing hooks from your hands, and you fight huge bosses with up to 4 people with a bow and arrow. After the Fall is a Left 4 Dead-like in VR. Team up with up to 3 people to shoot zombies and take on boss fights. From Other Suns is an Oculus exclusive roguelite. You're in space and you're trying to get back to Earth, but you need to keep finding fuel to keep moving forwards. So you end up having to board other ships and fight space pirates. Stormland is 2-player co-op. It's made by Insomniac Games. You can literally climb anything, fly around, and it has some of the most fun movement in VR. Demio is a tabletop D&D style game with cards you use for moves. It looks like a game for nerds, but I enjoyed it way more than I expected, so I guess I'm a nerd. Phasmophobia is a co-op horror game where you go into buildings trying to find and identify ghosts, then you bugger off in your van and leave someone else to deal with it. Downward Spiral is a really cool 4-hour single player shooter that you can play with 2-player co-op. It's got some really cool and interesting guns, it's got some creative movement with a grapple gun, and later on a boost gun to fly around. Here are some survival games. You've got Subnautica, which has got basic VR support, but there's actually a mod now which gives you motion controls. It's a beautiful game in VR with loads of fishes swimming around, including some really big ones that will eat you. The Forest is up to 4-player co-op. You crash land on an island full of cannibals and have to try and find your son by going through creepy caves and hitting the native people over the head. Some of them have got massive bazookas, if you know what I mean. No Man's Sky, well, you know what No Man's Sky is. The Solus Project is a really cool survival game, but you can turn the eating and drinking stuff off if you want to. You're on a sci-fi planet with an incredible atmosphere. You have to uncover the mysteries whilst avoiding deadly traps in caves or extreme weather like tornadoes or meteor strikes on the surface. Song in the Smoke is the best made for VR survival game. The crafting is all done by hand, including using a pestle and mortar to grind down fruit into paste. It can be a bit spooky at night, but it's a must play for survival game lovers. Green Hell VR is an excellent port of the non-VR game with incredible attention to detail put into all the VR interactions, like physically chopping down trees and having to wrap bandages around your wounds. How about sports games in VR? Well, you've got Walkabout Mini Golf, which is really good. It's got loads of courses, great physics, and it's really good fun playing with your friends. All-in-one sports VR looks like a Quest game, because it is, but don't let that fool you. This is basically Wii Sports in VR, and it's surprisingly well done with 13 games to play, from bowling, tennis to basketball. And I've been having a lot of fun playing this with friends. Kayak Mirage is a stunning, almost photorealistic kayaking game with a few locations to explore, with great attention to detail, including wildlife like penguins or dolphins to spot on your way. It's also got time trials with online leaderboards. VR Skater is the best VR skateboard game. It's very well put together. You do tricks by moving your hands, which sounds odd, but it works surprisingly well. The Climb is another Oculus exclusive made by Crytek. It's got stunning visuals, amazing attention to detail, and it's a good shoulder workout as well. How about some hack and slash games? Until You Fall is a roguelike with a unique melee system where you block oncoming attacks, which are shown on screen, and then you swing your sword to get hits, defeating more and more enemies until eventually you fail. Blade and Sorcery is a physics-based sword fighting game with melee. It's more of a sandbox game at the minute, but they have added procedural dungeons, and more updates will add replayability in the future. Hellsplit Arena is another physics-based hack and slash VR game. It's got excellent graphics, it's very polished, and this one has got a campaign to play through, but it is just going into levels defeating waves of bad guys. Asgard's Wrath is an Oculus exclusive with a 25-hour plus AAA quality adventure with a strong focus on melee fighting. It's got RPG-like elements and some light puzzles. Personally, I found this game excellent, and it's a must-play in my opinion. Grimlord is a new physics-based hack and slash game that is as close to Dark Souls in VR as you're going to get. It has difficult combat at times with brutal checkpoints and boss fights to test your nerves and patience. Battle Talent is a roguelike with lots of unlocks, magic, loads of enemies, weapons, and really good sense of progression. This is my new favourite physics-based VR melee game. Skyrim VR is Skyrim in VR. If you don't know what that is, then it's time to get out from under the rock that you've been living under. What about puzzle games? The Room VR A Dark Matter is my favourite escape the room type puzzle game, and it's based on the non-VR game series. It's got excellent puzzles, lots of hand interaction with elements and things in the game. It's a little bit short, about 4 hours, but the non-VR games are about the same length as well. Shadowpoint is still my favourite overall pure puzzle game. It's so creative, with you manipulating light to create shadows, but it adds so many new elements along the way and keeps you hooked with that perfect balance of just being able to figure things out before you get frustrated. Zing The Land Beyond is a non-VR game with a VR mode. It's a very pretty puzzle game where you have to play around with the elements to solve puzzles, like changing from day to night or making it rain. It's got a really good length as well that should take you over 10 hours to complete. The Talos Principle has got a VR version and it's pretty much the same game in VR. Red Matter 1 and 2 are really excellent sci-fi adventure puzzle games with excellent graphics and a big focus on interactivity with the environment. This is an absolute must-play series in my opinion, and it's a real showcase for VR. A Fisherman's Tale is a short but very sweet puzzle game where you're in a lighthouse and you've got a miniature lighthouse, and it plays with scale really well where you're passing objects to yourself making them bigger or smaller. The sequel, Another Fisherman's Tale, is even better. It's about twice as long at 4 hours playtime. It's incredibly creative where you can disconnect your hands and head and move around independently. It's got a really nice story, nice visuals, and it's even got a sing-song in one of the sections of the game. Mask Maker is another puzzle game by the same developers. You have to find and collect elements in different worlds to create masks. You build them in your workshop, and then when you put the mask on, it transports you to different areas. It's a really great use of VR, and it's a bit of a hidden gem. Humanity released recently for both non-VR and VR. The VR support is basically just you looking around in 3D, so you're still going to need to use a gamepad or a mouse and keyboard, but it's one of the best puzzle games I've played in a long time, and it's a real masterpiece. Wanderer is a time-travelling adventure game where you find fragments that you put into your watch and you get transported to different locations and times. You have to solve puzzles to find more fragments and unlock more locations. It's a very good game, but it's getting a refresh next year, so you might want to wait for that. Myst had a remake on PC with VR support. Really beautiful game that looks great in VR, and the puzzles are hard but just about manageable. The Last Clockwinder is a puzzle game where you make clones of yourself. So you throw something and then you walk over and catch the thing that you threw. You have to make an automation for a bunch of different things to try and save a tree in the ocean. Tetris Effect is a very divisive game. Personally, I loved it. The journey mode has got this incredible flow with the music and sounds of the Tetris pieces that sends you almost into a trance-like state. Floor Plan 2 is a sequel to the Gear VR game. This one's got wobbly arms, lots of character, and a really annoying ending. I Expect You to Die 1, 2, and soon 3 are all escape the room games designed to be played seated. You're a spy trying to stop a supervillain, and you have to solve puzzles through trial and error. You will die a lot. VR has got some rhythm games. You've got Beat Saber, where you slice blocks to the music, Audica, where you shoot targets to the music, Synth Riders, where your hands follow orbs to the music, Pistol Whip, where you shoot enemies to the music, and then Dance Central, where you try to dance to the music, but end up looking like a complete dickhead in front of your entire family and friends. What about some spooks? Layers of Fear VR is like a warped and twisted haunted house. It's very spooky and trippy in places. Westworld Awakening is based on the TV series. You play a host trying to escape another host who is programmed to murder you. This is an extremely high quality game with excellent graphics and a real hidden gem. Propagation Paradise Hotel is the scariest VR game I've ever played. You're trying to find your sister in a hotel whilst fighting off some really scary zombies. Lies Beneath is an Oculus exclusive survival horror game with a really nice comic book art style. It has really incredible sound design, some difficult sections, and overall an enjoyable VR game. Transference is a short, 2-hour long psychological horror game where you go into an apartment and things get very warped and freaky. I didn't personally find it very scary, but it's a really high quality game that you should pick up on a sale. Wilson's Heart is an Oculus exclusive early VR game. This is node based teleport set in a hospital with a black and white art style. This has got excellent voice acting, including many famous actors, and it's still a great game if you like story driven games with some cool set piece moments. Cosmodread is a roguelike horror game set on a space station with all sorts of hideous monsters that you have to kill or avoid whilst trying to escape. Not a very popular genre in VR, but there are some third-person VR games as well. Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice has got a VR mode. It's the same game but in VR, but it's visually stunning and it has some incredible moments. I honestly can't imagine playing this game out of VR. Moss Book 1 and 2 are fantastic isometric platformers where you control a mouse but also have the ability to reach into the world and help move things. Still one of my favourite VR games, and Moss Book 2 was my VR game of the year for 2022. Trover Saves the Universe is a Justin Roiland game. If you like his humour then you'll enjoy it, if you don't, then don't bother. Chronos is actually the prequel to Remnant from the Ashes, which released in VR first and then later got a non-VR version. This uses static cameras like the old Resident Evil games, and this one is actually focused on hack and slash combat instead of guns like Remnant. Edge of Nowhere is another Insomniac Games early Oculus exclusive. I love this game, and it was such a trip in VR, and the story is fantastic with good graphics and decent gameplay. We've got a few racing games in VR. Assetto Corsa, Project Cars 2, Automobilista 2 and Dirt Rally 2 are some of my favourites, and they're playable both in and out of VR. V-Racer Hoverbike is a VR-only futuristic hoverbike game where you have to hold your hands out in front of you and physically lean to steer. This works really well, and it's another hidden gem. CarX Drift Racing Online is a drift-focused racing game with the best drifting I've felt in a game. It's very hardcore and it takes a lot of practice, just like the real thing, but if you like drifting, this is the game for you. Vox Machina isn't really a racing game, but I wasn't sure where else to put it. You can control a mech, and the controls are all done using your hands with motor controls in the cockpit. It's got a single-player campaign, PvP and co-op missions. Flight games with VR support include Elite Dangerous, Star Wars Squadrons, DCS, IL-2 and Microsoft Flight Simulator. Project Wingman is a more arcade flight game, more like Ace Combat, and this also has VR support. I enjoy this one the most out of all of those. It's great for people who are nerds, but not quite full-on dorks. Warplanes, World War I Fighter and Battle of Pacific are VR-only flying games similar to Vox Machina, where you use the motion controls to actually grab all the stuff in the cockpit and fly the plane. You can even pick up bombs and then drop them with your hands, or grab a flare gun to take out blimps in the sky. And that's your lot. That was a list of 100 great quality PC VR games to play, so next time someone says that there aren't any good games, show them this video. Thank you very much to my Patreon and YouTube members for not just moral support, but actually putting their hands in the pocket and giving me money to feed my cats.